Why is she even here? She didn't pay for any of this, my aunt snapped across the Christmas table. My cousins laughed. Someone whispered, "Just ignore her." I quietly pressed record on my phone. What I heard next changed everything. My name is Danielle Carter, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a freelance audio editor and podcast producer. Most people think that sounds interesting. My family does not. To them, my job has always been a joke. My Aunt Linda loves to call it playing with headphones. I grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than kindness. Expensive cars, perfect houses, perfect photos during holidays. If you didn't fit that picture, you were treated like a background character. Aunt Linda was the loudest voice in the room every time. She praised her own daughter constantly. In her eyes, that daughter was the favorite, the one everyone should admire. Then there was me, quiet Danielle, the cousin who worked online and lived in a small apartment downtown. I spent most of my 20s trying to build a freelance career. Money was tight for a while. Because of that, my relatives assumed I had failed at life. Family gatherings were full of small cuts, cheap gifts handed to me with fake smiles, jokes about my job, comments about how tiny my apartment must be. Still, I kept showing up. I believed family was supposed to matter. I believed patience and kindness would eventually mean something. I wasn't rich or glamorous like the people my aunt loved to brag about, but I had something they didn't expect. I understood sound. I understood how to capture it, clean it, and preserve it better than anyone sitting in that dining room. If you've ever had family treat your dreams like a joke, you probably know the feeling I had sitting at that table. Maybe someone laughed at your career or told you your work wasn't real. If that sounds familiar, subscribe and tell me your story in the comments. And if you want to support stories like this, hit like and click hype before we keep going. That Christmas dinner started like every other holiday at Aunt Linda's house. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles filled the air. The long table was covered with red decorations and gold napkins. Everything looked perfect. I walked in carrying a homemade apple crumble. I spent 2 hours baking. Aunt Linda looked at the dish and smiled in a thin way. "Oh," she said loudly, "store-bought would have been easier for you." My cousins chuckled. I sat down quietly and placed the dish on the counter. I tried not to react. Dinner began. Plates clinked, glasses tapped together. My aunt talked the entire time, mostly about her daughter. "She just got promoted again," Linda said proudly. "Six-figure salary already, and her fiancé is buying them a house." Everyone nodded and smiled. Then she turned her head toward me. "And some people," she said, pointing her fork, "chase real careers. Others just play around online." The table went quiet for a second. I opened my mouth to speak, but my uncle quickly changed the subject. Later that night, I stepped away from the dining room. I needed air. My chest felt tight. As I walked down the hallway, I heard my aunt's voice coming from the kitchen. She was on the phone. Her voice was low now, careful. "Don't worry," she said softly. "She'll never know what really happened with the money." I stopped moving. Something about that sentence felt wrong. My heart started pounding. Slowly, I pulled out my phone and opened the recorder. My hands were shaking as I pressed the red button. Aunt Linda kept talking. "The inheritance was handled," she said with a laugh. "Everyone believes I did it honestly." My stomach dropped. She was talking about my grandmother. My grandmother passed away 3 years earlier. Aunt Linda had managed the estate. She told everyone the money was divided fairly, but now she was laughing about it. "I moved some of the funds," she continued on the call. "No one will ever check." I felt my pulse in my ears as I held the phone closer to the doorway. This recording could expose something huge. Then suddenly a voice behind me said loudly, "Danielle, why are you standing here?" I spun around. It was my cousin Trevor holding a soda can. My phone slipped into my pocket. Bathroom line, I muttered quickly. Trevor shrugged and walked away. A few minutes later, Aunt Linda called everyone back to the dining room. I sat down again. My chest was still tight. She looked at me with a smirk. Danielle was hiding in the hallway, she told everyone, probably avoiding adult conversations. The table erupted with laughter again. I forced a smile, but inside I felt something changing. Later, during dessert, my family started discussing a beach trip planned for the summer. "Flights are already booked," one cousin said. "Wait," I asked quietly. "What trip?" They all stared at me like I had missed a memo. "Oh," my cousin said awkwardly, "we thought you knew." Apparently, there had been a group chat planning the trip for months. Everyone was in it. Everyone except me. "We figured you'd be busy," another cousin said with a shrug, "with whatever you do." I nodded slowly and looked down at my plate. By the end of the night, I overheard something else. My aunt was telling relatives I still owed the family money from years ago when they helped me during college. That wasn't true. I had paid every cent back, but the story spread quickly through whispers around the room. I sat in my car later that night and listened to the recording again through my earbuds. Her voice was clear, too clear. Every word about the inheritance, every laugh. Anger burned in my chest. The next day, I called her. "Aunt Linda," I said carefully, "can we talk about Grandma's inheritance?" Her voice turned cold immediately. "Don't start digging where you don't belong," she snapped. The line went dead. But I stayed calm. I already had the truth. Working in audio had taught me something important. People reveal more than they think. They leave traces everywhere. That night, I loaded the recording into my editing software. The glow of the computer screen lit up my small apartment while I cleaned the sound. I removed background noise. I boosted her voice. Every word became sharp and clear. What they didn't know was that recording wasn't the only thing I had. Months earlier, my aunt had accidentally forwarded me an email chain meant for her accountant. I never deleted it. The emails talked about reallocating funds from the estate account. At the time, I thought it was confusing financial language. Now it looked different. Now it looked like evidence. I opened the folder and read everything again carefully. Slowly, the story formed. Money had been moved. Quietly. I didn't confront anyone right away. Instead, I saved every file, every email, every piece of audio. I waited. By the time the next family gathering came around, I wasn't walking in blind anymore. I called my cousin Rachel. Rachel had always been treated like the family outsider, too. She lived across town and rarely attended events. When I told her about the recording, she went quiet for a long moment. "I always wondered," she finally said. "Wondered what?" "Why Grandma's instructions were never shown to us." Rachel explained that my grandmother had once told her the inheritance would be split equally between all grandchildren, but nobody had ever seen the official document. "Everyone trusts Linda because she talks the loudest," Rachel said. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Then maybe it's time someone lets the truth speak instead." We met at a coffee shop and listened to the recording together. Rachel's eyes widened. "That's it," she whispered. "That proves it." Over the next week, we reviewed every email and document. Rachel helped me organize everything in order. Meanwhile, Aunt Linda announced another big gathering, a New Year's Eve at her house. She bragged about how the entire family would be there. "How perfect it will look," she said during a phone call. I smiled quietly while holding my phone. Perfect was exactly what I needed. They thought the story about the inheritance was buried forever, but I was about to press play. New Year's Eve arrived cold and bright. Aunt Linda's living room was packed with relatives and neighbors. Music played softly while people drank champagne. I stood near the wall, watching. The smell of perfume and sparkling wine filled the air. Eventually, my aunt tapped her glass to make a toast. "To family," she said loudly, "even the ones still trying to figure out their life." A few people laughed and glanced toward me. I set my drink down. My voice stayed calm. "Before we celebrate, can we talk about Grandma's inheritance?" The room went silent. My aunt forced a laugh. "This again?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker sitting beside the table. "I just want everyone to hear something," I said. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. "Don't worry, she'll never know what really happened with the money." Gasps spread across the room. My aunt's smile disappeared. The recording continued. Her laughter echoed from the speaker. "Everyone believes I handled it honestly." My uncle stepped forward slowly. "Linda, what is this?" I opened another file on my phone. "These are emails from the estate account," I said clearly. "They mention moving funds that were supposed to be divided equally." Rachel stepped beside me. "Grandma told me the inheritance would be shared," she said. My aunt's face turned red. "You recorded me? That's illegal." I looked straight at her. Stealing from family isn't exactly illegal either. Voices rose around the room. My uncle grabbed the phone and replayed the audio. His jaw tightened. "Thousands of dollars," he muttered. My aunt tried to argue, but the words fell apart. Everyone had heard the truth. I stood there quietly while the room filled with angry voices. Then I said the only thing I needed to say. "All these years, you treated me like I didn't belong, but I was the only one paying attention." A month later, the family hired an accountant to review the estate records. The truth came out quickly. Money had been taken and moved into accounts my aunt controlled. She was forced to repay every dollar. I didn't attend the meeting where it happened. I didn't need to. Rachel called me afterward and said, "You did the right thing." Our relationship grew stronger after that. As for the rest of the family, things changed. The laughter stopped. The jokes about my job disappeared. I stopped attending gatherings out of obligation. Instead, I focused on my work and my life. My audio business grew slowly but steadily. Sometimes I think back to that Christmas dinner. They spent years laughing at the girl with the headphones, but those headphones heard the truth they tried to hide. If you've ever been embarrassed or dismissed by your own family, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments what happened and how you handled it. Subscribe if you want to be part of a community where stories like this are heard, and click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Did this story hit home? Let me know by liking the video and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Click hype to help this story find others who have felt the same way. Your support makes a huge difference, and I always read what you share.